Last video we looked at card advantage, where the basic premise was whoever draws the most cards in a game of Magic wins. We had a thought experiment where the players' decks were made up of forests and bears, and we posited that whoever drew the most bears won. Well, one way of doing that is, of course, to draw more cards, but the other method is to make sure that more of the cards that you do draw are bears as compared to forests. This touches on another important feature of Magic strategy: card quality. Imagine the thought experiment with forests and bears, but where one player had a deck with 30 forests and 30 bears, and another player's deck was 40 bears and 20 forests. You can imagine that even though they're both drawing the same number of cards, the player with the 40 bear deck will likely win. A big portion of manipulating card quality comes from deck building. Having the right mix of different lands and spells that will be advantageous at different stages of the game is a huge part of deck building. Now, this video is going to assume you already have a deck and you're just looking to play it better. In a game of Magic, two of the most common forms of increasing your card quality is through deck thinning and card selection. To explain deck thinning, I'll take a look at a common type of card, a fetch land. Fetch lands serve two purposes. The first one's obvious. They make it easier to cast your spells by fixing your mana, but they also make your deck thinner. Imagine the Bear Forest example, but this time one player has 30 forests and the other has 15 forests and 15 fetch lands. The player with the fetch lands starts the game just as likely to draw a land or a creature, but as he plays more and more fetch lands, he removes more and more lands from his deck. If both players drew 10 lands and 10 bears, then the fourth player will have 20 forests left, and the fetch land player will have about 15 lands left. All of a sudden, the fetch land player has a 57% chance of drawing a creature, whereas the forest player still only has a 50% chance. Both decks have the same number of creatures in them, but since one deck is thinner, the fetch land player is more likely to draw a creature. Another form of deck thinning can be found in cantrips. As long as you have enough time to play them, each cantrip replaces itself and makes your deck effectively one card smaller. The other way of increasing card quality is through card selection, which is effectively the ability to choose which cards you draw. Imagine a bear that had the ability to scry 1. In our thought experiment, giving this upgrade to a bear would greatly increase the card quality of one player. The player would be able to look at the card he is about to draw and decide if he wants to keep it or not. That second chance is what card selection is all about. Of course, Scry does one better because it doesn't just shuffle the card back into the deck, it puts it at the bottom of the deck, which is another effective form of deck thinning. If a player has scried 5 lands to the bottom of his deck, then we can effectively consider the deck to be 5 cards smaller when calculating the probability of what is on top of the deck. This combination of selection and thinning makes Scry a very powerful ability. However, it's very rare that you'll find the ability to scry, or even thin your deck for free. The ability to understand the value of card selection and deck thinning, and weigh it against the loss of life or tempo that usually comes with it, is an important part of advanced Magic strategy. We'll discuss tempo and alternative costs in a future video, but for now, try thinking about how deck thinning increases your chances at drawing a card. A common mistake is to overvalue deck thinning. Here's a quick shortcut. On turn 3 or 4, you should have about 50 cards left in your deck, which means that you have about a 2% chance of drawing any one card. Let's assume you have 4 cards that you really want to draw. That means you have a 4 out of 50 or an 8% chance of drawing them next turn. Removing 1 card from your deck gives you a 4 out of 49 chance, which is 8.16. A more generous example would be to say that on turn 4 you have decided that you have enough lands in your hand and you want to decrease the chance that you will draw a land. Well, if you have 21 lands out of the 50 cards left in your deck, you have a 42% chance. And if you thinned 1 land out, you'd have a 20 out of 49 chance, which is 40.8. That 1.2% might not seem very large, but it's important to remember that deck thinning affects each card you draw, so it does not take very long for those 1% chances to add up to something more substantial. If you really want to take your game to the next level, having a solid understanding of probability is helpful, but that's probably a lesson better taught elsewhere. Next episode, we'll be discussing mana efficiency. See you there.